So for searching in an array, we saw index of and last index of and includes. So index of and last index of returned the index of the matching item, else -1, and includes returned either true or false, right? But what if I want the item itself if it's found? So for example, we have a simple array, okay, and it has these numbers 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 in their corresponding indexes. So I've intentionally kept it same as the index so that it's easier for us to figure out things. So if I do array dot index of 3, I'll get 3, which is the index of 3, right? If I do array dot index of, not index of, includes 3, I get true, which means that 3 is present in the array. But what if I want this particular value back? And I'll show you a couple of use cases of this. What if I want this value back? Not the index, not true or false, but the value itself. So one way is that we get the index. So array.index of 3 will give us back the index, and then what we can do is we can use the box notation to find, right? So in that way we are able to get the value. It is equivalent to array 3, okay, and we get back 3. But there's a better way to do this, and that way is using dot find. Okay, so dot find and find index and the find last index. So first let's look at find, which is very, very useful and used a lot. So array, I'll just clear things up once, and array dot find takes a callback function. Okay, so find takes a callback function, so it's going to be a function, and I'm sorry, so file takes a callback function and it gives us back all 3 of those which we got in for each: item, index, and array. So we have item, we have index, and we have array. Okay, and here if true is returned, then the item is returned and the iteration is stopped. If for false scenarios, it keeps on running. So in every iteration I get access to the item. I can check this item against something. Okay, so for example, in every iteration, if I just console log item, okay, and I run it, so you see that it goes through each and every item 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Now if I return item equals to 3. Okay, so what will be the return value in the first iteration? In the first iteration, 0 is not equal to 3, so this iteration will continue. Then it will move to 1. Again, 1 is not equal to 3, so iteration will continue to 2. Then the item would be 2. 2 is not equal to 3, so again the iteration would continue, right? And finally 3 is equal to 3, then 3 will be returned. Okay, so array.find is used in this way. I'll also give a couple of more very real world examples where find is very useful. There is a shortcut we can write. Okay, so if you have studied the arrow functions in one of the ES6 lessons, so what we can do is array.find. If an arrow function has just one argument, then it does not need opening and closing parentheses. So I can just write item. And if we are returning something, then we can return it implicitly. So I can just write item triple equals to 3. Okay, and this is exact same as this function is exact same as this function that we wrote in 3 lines. Okay, again item is the argument. If this syntax doesn't look very intuitive to you, go through the ES6 or the lesson where I taught arrow functions. So this is the argument and this is the return thing. So directly after the arrow sign, if we write something in one line, that's implicit return. Okay, and what will happen if we try to look for something which does not exist? Then undefined is returned. So array.find is used in this way. Let's see how to find and return something here. Okay, so array2 dot find callback function, it gets item in every iteration, and what we need to return, we need to check something. So in the first iteration, item would be an object with the property name, second property name, third property name, right? So I can check item dot name is equal to Peter, right? And you can see that it was able to find an object whose name was Peter and it returned me the found object. Please try to understand this. Okay, so let me write it in a normal function way, that way it will be a bit clearer to you. So array.find, okay, we pass in a callback function and the callback function gets item, rest of the arguments are optional. Okay, and if we return a falsy value, the iteration continues, and as soon as the truthy value is computed, that item is returned. So what I'm returning here is item is an object. So in the first instance, in the first iteration, the item is going to be an object with name property called John. Okay, so basically I'm checking that in this object, so this object is going to be the first item. So this item is going to be this object because this is the first item of the array. So what I'm returning is, I'm checking if item dot name is equal to maybe John. Okay, so I'm returning item dot name is equal to John. Okay. Array 2, array 2 dot find. Okay. So here basically in the very first iteration I get that item dot name is equal to John, and that particular object is returned. Okay. Just play around it with for some time. In the javascript.info, again a very real world example is given. So we have an array of objects of users, and in every object I have ID and name. I have to find the user whose ID is 1. So ID is known to us, but we don't know the name. So how do we do that? So again the same thing. We call the find method in this array. In the callback function, we get item in every iteration. We are checking if item.id is 1. So it will return true only when the item.id is 1, else it will return false. And hence we get back the user object here, which matches this find condition. Okay. So let us read through the notes. So in the real life, arrays of objects is a very common thing, especially in JavaScript. So the find method is very useful. So in the example, we provide find the function, this function with one argument, and that's typical, right? Most of the times in the find, when you're using find, you will be needing just one argument. So please practice this kind of a syntax until it becomes very, intuitive to you. Array.findIndex method has the same syntax, but it returns the index where the element was found instead of the element itself, and value of -1 is returned if nothing is found. And array.findIndex method is like findIndex, but it searches from right to left. Okay, so find gives you back the item. Find index gives you back the item index, and last index basically from the right, the last matching item, the index of the last matching item. Okay, so find, again very important. Do practice it a little bit before moving on to filter. So whenever we are learning these array methods which are callback based, right? So for example, the find was callback based. So at that time, the thing that you should be focusing on, that whatever is returned from each callback function, how that is treated. If you understand this much, with a little bit of practice, you will master these. So this is the problem. This is the mental model that most of the YouTube videos fails to create, right? So for example, in find, if true is returned, the item is returned and iteration is stopped. So this is something you need to remember about find. How is filter different? Again, pay a very close attention to what happens to what is returned inside the callback function. Okay, we will come here. Let's read through. The find methods looks for a single element that makes the function return true. If there may be many, we can use array.filter, right? So find returns the previous one that we explored, the previous array method that we explored, that it tries to find for a single element that makes the function return true. But what if we need a new array with multiple items which matches? Okay, so it's very similar to find, but returns an array of matching elements. Okay, so here if you read this is the most important line here. If true, item is pushed to the results and the iteration continues, and finally it returns empty array if nothing is found, else an array of values that were pushed to the result. Okay, so for example, the same example. Okay, so we are using some users. We are storing the return of this method in a variable called some users, and inside the filter callback function, the condition that we have written is that if item.id is less than 3. Okay, so let's see first iteration. So in the first iteration, item.id is 1. So this particular expression would return true, right? Because 1 is less than 3. So this item will be added to the returns array. Then in the second iteration, again item.id 2 is less than 3. So again, since the return of the callback function was true, so this item will also be added to the results array and it will implicitly be returned. Okay, I hope this is very, very clear to you. Let me show you a couple of examples of array.filter because you will be using it a lot in both interviews and your projects. So suppose we have a string. Let string is equal to maybe 0. Okay, Z-E-R-O. Okay, then str dot I'm not sure what it is. I'm just figuring out along with you. If it contains O, no, there is nothing called contains. It's includes O, then it returns true. If string includes T, then it returns false. Okay, so now let's take example of the first array. Okay, array dot, and we will store it in a separate array. So let filtered array is equal to array dot filter. Okay, we get each item in each for each iteration, and what will we return if item dot includes O. Now before I hit enter, I want you to figure out. I don't even need to store because console will just show it to me, but I want to figure out what will be the answer, what will be stored in filtered array. Just think of it for a moment. Okay, so let me run it and let me see what's there in filter array. So it has 0, 1, 2 and 4. It does not contain 3. What happened here? So array.filter takes a callback function. That callback function gets each item one by one. So it is called 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 number of times with each value one by one. So in the first iteration, item is 0. What is this callback function returning? It's returning if item includes, that means 0 includes an O. Does 0 include an O? True. So what does the first iteration return? True. Since it's a truthy value, so this particular first item would be added to the results array. Same thing happens with this. Same thing happens with this. So in the fourth iteration, the item is 3. Does item include O? False. It returns a falsy value. So this item 3 is not added to the results array, and the iteration moves ahead. It moves to 4. And 4, since it includes an O, that 4 is added to the results array and finally returned. Okay, so this is how filter works. Whenever the callback function returns a truthy value, that particular item is included in the results array. Now let's see if we are looking for something that does not exist at all. So let me also, let it return to the console so that I don't have to even store a value. So if I'm trying to search for something that does not exist in any of the items, right? Still, it returns an array which is an empty array. So as you become a seasoned developer, you will realize that these things are very important, right? Because you are sure that the return of array.filter is going to be an array. If its length is 0, that means nothing was found. If it has something in there, that means something was matching and something was found, and that is filtered down for us. Okay, so there are two ways you can think of it. Depending on the return value of the callback function, if it's a falsy value, it's filtered out, or if it's a truthy value, it's included in the results array. Whatever looks more intuitive to you. Now, I would suggest you not to hurry up to the next thing. Let this information absorb, maybe pause video and try to do this yourself. Okay, just copy users in either VS Code or console and try to find out all the users whose name contains maybe A, okay, or maybe E, or whose ID is less than or equal to 2 or more than or equal to 2. So try out the filter method a couple of times before moving to map. So till now, the classification of array methods that we looked into was finding and then filtering, and now transforming. Okay, so this transforming, especially this map, is really important. So just take a few seconds to absorb the knowledge and then we'll move to map. So you can see that array.map method is one of the most useful and most often used. Okay, so again, pay attention to how return value is treated in array.map. So it calls the function for each element of the array and returns the array of result. So we call array map on the array, pass in a callback function. You can see this. It gets item index array, and whatever we return here, so we have item, we have index, we have the entire array, so we can do anything here, right? We can return anything here. So whatever is returned, that becomes the value instead of the item. I mean, it's much more simpler and powerful than the definition looks like. Let's look at an example so it makes a little bit more sense to you. I'll revert it back to our same example. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'll save it, run it. And let's see what we have in array. So in array, we have 6 items, 0 till 5. Okay. Now I want a squares array. Okay. Let square array is equal to, and what should be its value? It should look like, it should iterate over each item. So it should take 0 and multiply it by itself. So 0 into 0 is going to be 0. Then 1 into 1 is going to be 1. Then 2 into 2 is going to be 4. 3 into 3 is going to be 9, and so on. Right? So we have to iterate over each items of ARR, but the result array should not have these items as it is, but we want square of each item. How do we do that? For transforming an array and each item of the array, we use map. So array.map. Again, it gets a callback function. Okay. And inside the function, I have access to item. Okay. And what I am returning is item multiplied by item. So now if I hit enter and look at squares array, you can see that we have a brand new array which is one-on-one mapping of the original array, right? So original array has 6 items, and the squared array will also contain 6 items, the same number of items. But we have written a logic that will square all the items. Okay. So here so again, if you read the documentation again, whatever is returned, that becomes the new value instead of the item. So here, since we are returning item multiplied by item, that becomes the new item. Again, let's try out a couple of more examples. So let maybe, plus 1 array, maybe plus 1 array is equal to array.map. We get each item, and instead of returning the, okay, tell me something. If I just return item, what will I get? I'll get the exact same thing. Okay. So if I see plus 1 array, it's exact same thing, right? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But if I do it item plus 1, if I return item plus 1 on each iteration, what would I get? You will see that 1 is added to each item. So 0 became 1, 1 became 2, 2 became 3. Okay. So this is where map is very useful. Let's look one more example with array2. Instead of an object, and please, if required, pause the video and think how you can accomplish it. So the array2 originally is an array of objects. It's an array of objects. But what I want is my API or my program needs an array of just the names, nothing else. These strings. How do I do that? Pause the video, think for a moment. Okay, the way we do it is, so whenever we need one-on-one mapping, so for example, if I have an array of 3 items, I need 3 items, and I do something with each item, and I return 3 items which are different from the original items, we use map. Okay, so array2.map, it will get item, and what we want to return for each item is item.name, and we get the array of names. So we were able to transform this kind of an array to this kind of an array. Okay, I'll highly encourage you to practice it for a moment before moving to the next concepts.